Well, hello everybody. This is Daniel with Daniel's Bullion Coins, and we have had a crazy busy week. I've got my sweet wife Ingrid here,
Hello.
and we're going to take some questions.
Okay, well, let's talk about the crazy week. What did we
Yes.
see?
Yes, so this is June the 1st, and typically with the first of the month, we see sellers coming in, and boy, did they come in force this week. Yesterday, we were real busy with people selling, a lot of people selling.
Actually, today's the 31st.
Today's the 31st, but we're looking at the first of the
I
month.
know. Okay.
But we're looking at things that happen on the
Yes.
first of the month.
Right.
June 1st is coming up, and so here we are dealing with people selling.
Yes.
A lot of sellers.
A lot of sellers. Didn't we see that? Okay, so what do you look forward to? What are your predictions then?
So on the predictions, I'm going to stick with my 4,000 by the end of this year. Possibly, maybe 45. I don't know. That's a give me.
Yeah.
And then 6,000 before Trump leaves office, and that's without a major event. That's just with
Yeah.
things going along smoothly, like they are, without a major collapse in the
Right.
dollar or something like
or
that.
some
Unforeseen
yes,
thing.
because there's so much going on that could possibly. Okay, now last week, I kind of whoa when I heard you say there were some things that Trump was doing or didn't do that you don't like. Which,
Right.
Could you elaborate?
Yeah, maybe I should try to expand that a little bit.
Yeah.
I definitely don't like the fact that we're going in debt more. We're adding
Yeah.
to the debt. I understand we're increasing the military and the CBO projection that they have for that.
Oh, what's CBO?
It's the credit, it's the agency that rates what the presidency is doing on
Oh.
scoring, how it's going to be. Is this going to be profitable? Is this going to be a negative thing? And they're always wrong. In Trump's first term,
Yeah.
he did some things, and they scored it as at really low a loss. And
course.
same thing this time, they're scoring it really, really low. But it's the revenues and things that are going to come out. But we're
Okay.
continuing the debt thing. We're
Right.
continuing to spend. It's the whole Doge stopping his thing that he was doing. A lot of the people stayed with the administration. They moved over to Scott Bassett, and they're doing work with him in the Treasury Department. But I think we just got so much pushback from the Democrats that the Doge had to really back off of the fraud and
Really?
finding the fraud. Right.
I knew Elon. I
Yes.
haven't been up on the news so much, but I knew Elon had stopped. He reached his 130 days. He
Right.
had to stop.
Right.
But I didn't think Doge, the whole thing, was going to stop.
Yeah, the whole Doge thing has they're not looking into it anymore.
Oh, that's too bad.
Those people moved over to Scott Bassett. They're in the Treasury Department, and so the actual investigating for fraud and waste and all of that, it had to stop because there was just so much screaming and yelling and complaining about it from the
Unbelievable.
Democrats, and probably even so also from the Republicans a little bit. So the pushback, and you have to pick your battles. I remember when my kids were little and they would do something and they would give me trouble, and I would say, is that something I want to deal with right now? Maybe we'll let it go.
Do I want to die on this hill?
Yeah, do I want to die on this hill with these kids right here? And so, they let certain things go. And so we have the debt ceiling, and we have Doge backing off. Yes, it was his 100 days, but he could have left those guys. That could have
know,
been
I thought
an
he
agency
would.
that maybe went deeper and did more, and it
Right.
kind of faded away. So, and I understand Trump has to pick his battles.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you said there was another thing. You mentioned Fort Knox. I was gonna
Oh,
ask you
yes,
about that.
yes, Fort Knox. Of course, they talked about going in and auditing Fort Knox. And so the Doge thing, dissolved and went away, and there's nothing being done there. And you talk about things not being done. We really need to see justice. If we don't
Yes.
see justice, and maybe they're waiting, to have this grand slam next year coming up to the midterms, but we have got to do something about justice in this nation.
Yeah.
If people aren't prosecuted for crimes that were done, then this nation is not going to be able to pull itself together. It's like having a child and you just let them get away and let
Yeah.
them get away with things and let them get away and there's no consequences. Well, they grew up to be a brat.
Yeah.
And you've got this problem person when
In and
they're
out of
older.
jail.
Right. And you can deal with it when they're younger so much
Right.
easier than when they're older. And if we don't deal with this injustice, while it's not really in its younger stages, but it's getting to the point where the child is getting 5 years old, and if we don't do something with injustice, justice and rein it in.
Yeah.
We're going to have a rebellious child that can't even go out and get a
Lawlessness.
job, and lawlessness, and so
Yeah.
we've got to do something about that.
Okay, so what is this about China backing away from their trade deal?
Yes, yes. So, of course, I said from the very beginning that China is not going to go quietly.
Right.
And when they made this trade deal, I believe it was in Switzerland a couple weeks ago, they met and talked with
Yeah.
Scott Bassett. And everything was great, and they lifted the tariffs,
Right.
and everything was back to no. China was just stalling. And you're going to see this repeated over and over and over again. China is not going to do the right thing. You know, they are positioning themselves in many ways. And let me just talk about some of the things that they're doing. One of them is that they let their insurance companies have a mandatory 1% gold holding. And I imagine that they're going to increase that to 2 and 3% and on up to 5%. You know, we were talking about the predictions this week.
Right.
Here you saw DeSantis going with passing a law, you know, for gold and silver as a
Yes.
monetary metal, and
Oh
we
my
have many
gosh.
other
Let's all
states
move to
in the
Florida.
process, right, in Florida, and so we have many other states, you know, going that way,
Yeah.
and then we have China, you know, saying that their insurance companies need to have gold rather than the U.S. Treasury bonds, so they're
Okay,
getting out of
that's what
Treasury
it
bonds,
is.
and they're telling them to get into gold. All of that happening this week, and yet we saw gold getting suppressed. The reason that it's being suppressed is because it's starting to run away from silver. You know, it's
Yeah.
100 to 1, and they don't want it to get 110, 120 to 1. Then silver's going to have a breakout.
Yeah.
And when silver has a breakout, it's going to get the average person involved. And you look at China, their people understand. These people in other countries, they understand currency collapse. They've seen Japan default on their bonds and go to zero.
Is that what's happening? Something's going on now with
That's
Japanese
happening in
bonds?
Japan right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Japan bonds are collapsing, which is a huge problem because that's going to, you know, go into Europe and then into the U.S. The bonds as the price of trash bonds start to escalate. Japan is the worst because we have what's called a carry trade, where people make money off of printing yen, buying the dollar in treasuries, and then reselling them. So it's this vicious cycle. I'm not going to go into the
Yeah,
details.
it's
very
I've been
complicated.
trying to understand.
But Japan
Yeah.
has been printing money.
Yeah.
The U.S. has been printing money, and they just trade.
keep
and there's a
racing
profit for
to
the
see.
people who do that, who buy it and trade it and print it and trade it. So that's coming to an end. People are getting tired of. Well, I bought the story about the eggs where the guy buys eggs and the price goes up a little bit, so he buys more eggs, and the price goes up higher, and he buys more eggs, and then finally he says, I want to sell the eggs. He tells the guy, I want to sell the eggs. Well, you're the only buyer, you know, because you're buying so much, the price is
The
going
price
up.
went up.
So that's sort of what the yen has done. They just printed money until, hey, who's going to buy this? Well, you're the buyer. You're the
Oh,
sole
yeah.
buyer of
So
this
no one else
stuff.
wants to buy 'em.
Nobody else wants to buy it. But there was profit in doing that because of the yen dollar carry trade.
Wow.
These market makers looking for profit could do that and make money.
Yeah.
Well, that has come to an end as the price of the Japanese bonds are starting to escalate for
Right.
fear. You know, people are starting to getting out. So China, let's go back to China. China's leaving our bonds also. They're telling their people to get into gold. They're even giving their people, their citizens, coupons to get into gold. So if they buy
Really?
gold, you can get a tax deduction, you get favorable.
Oh, my goodness.
And those people, they really understand gold and silver.
Yeah.
And we don't in this country.
No, we don't.
Cannot convince people. You can talk to them till
No.
you're blue in the face. If they don't get it, they just don't
They
get
don't
it.
get it. And I mean, the government and everybody else is not really encouraging at all for anyone to buy silver
No,
or gold.
there's no encouragement
In
at
fact,
all.
it's the opposite.
It's the complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
The government is completely blocking, whether it's the media or their collusion with the big banks
Yeah.
in stopping people from buying gold and silver.
The stock
So, and
market,
here
yeah.
over in Japan, there you see all these things that they're doing. And they're also doing a lot of things as far as like buying our scrap gold. Everything that we turn in as scrap gold, they're buying it, taking it over there and melting it. So it's not traceable.
Japan,
China.
Okay,
China.
China. You said
China.
Japan.
And
Yeah.
they're buying our dory. Anywhere that they can find dory, that's
What's dory?
that's rocks that come out of the ground that are really, really rich in gold.
Yeah.
So it needs to be refined.
Yeah.
So they're willing to buy all that. And there have been Japanese citizens, and they've been linked to the CCP, that are coming over here and buying gold bars and things like that, $250,000 here and there. They're picking these people up occasionally, catching them, that are buying gold and flying back to Japan. So they could potentially have, some say, 20,000 metric tons, up to 30,000 metric tons of gold that China has been stockpiling along and along. So that compared to our 8,000 metric tons, so they're gonna just push this thing and push Trump down the road as much as they can as they're getting the BRICS nations things up and running. And Japan is collapsing, and they're starting to hook their caboose to China, and then you've got Russia pushing the envelope with Trump over Ukraine. So you see an alliance starting to form again. Even though India is kind of playing the U.S., they may swing back to the BRICS. So we're going to have to watch the BRICS nation meeting, which is coming up here shortly, and see who all shows up and what all is said. But they are definitely forming an alliance to come against the dollar. So we have to, and you look at China, as far as like with the fentanyl, I've mentioned how that's killing our military age men. They're buying up our farmland. They're stealing our international property. So, China is going to be a real battle for us and Trump in this new paradigm that Trump is trying to build. And I've talked about the citizens currency that I think that Trump's going to try to put together.
Interesting times, my goodness.
Yes, so we're watching fascinating, interesting times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you were going to talk about the naysayers.
Yeah, so we get a lot. Everybody sees the naysayers. If you look at any YouTube video and you see the comments, we have the naysayers that come in here, and I get the comments from them.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell a quick story here about proving that the naysayers are wrong. Ingrid and I started buying silver back, it was probably about 2007, 2008, and it was fairly affordable. Probably it was in the $20 range for an ounce of silver. And we bought all the way up until the 40s. It got up into the 40s, near $50 an ounce. And we were able to sell that silver where we had doubled our money just in a few years, and then buy what was low. We bought 8 acres, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, needed a lot of work. Needed a lot of work.
Scared me to pieces.
Ingrid wouldn't even let me take pictures of it or videos because the house was in such terrible condition. It did not look like it was revivable.
No.
And we remodeled it and fixed it up, and of course we moved in it. But the point I'm trying to make is that we were able to sell the silver when it was high and buy the property when it was low. They were auctioning it off because of foreclosures and things like that. Now, if we had bought back in the 90s when silver was $2 or $3 an ounce, and then rode it that 20 years or 25 years, at the end, the last 5% of that time, we made most of our profit. And that's what we're trying to encourage people, trying to show people what we did back then. We're not financial advisors. We're just telling you what we did. We bought it when it was low, and we sold it when it was high. And then we did the same thing with the property. We bought it when it was low, and now we could sell it, and it's high right now, and do other things. So that proves the naysayers wrong. People that text in and say, well, it's down this week, and I talk about how it's being suppressed. We talked last week about consolidation happened, and now we're saying it's suppression. So, let the naysayers say what they want to say. We have proof in our own lives that you can buy low, sell high, and ride that cyclical market higher and higher.
Yes,
So
that's really good.
Just something I wanted to share this week with you all. We appreciate everybody coming.
Blessings,
Bless
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.